It is on the cold morning of my wife's funeral that everything begins. The church bells toll each strike heavier than the last, as though they are counting down to some unseen judgment. The air smells faintly of lilies, their sweetness masking the bitterness in my chest. I sit in the front pew, hands clutching the black leather gloves she once gave me on our 30th anniversary. They feel too warm, too alive for a day that should be frozen in grief. As the priest begins his solemn words, I notice the casket. Someone has placed a single folded letter on top of it. The handwriting on the envelope, her familiar loops, her gentle slant makes my breath catch. My wife's hand. But she has been gone for 3 days. My heart stumbles in its rhythm. I glance around, but no one seems to notice. Not my son standing stiffly at the side of the coffin, not the distant relatives whispering behind lace veils. Only me. My fingers ache to reach for it, but before I can rise, a shadow leans down beside me. It's Mr. Harlan, my neighbor for 20 years. A quiet man with eyes that always seemed to notice more than they revealed. His lips barely move yet. I hear him as if the words are etched into my ear, "Don't trust your son." I almost laugh. Then, bitter and hollow, because who else is left for me to trust? My wife is gone. My family scattered. My son, the boy I raised, the man who carried his mother's coffin this very morning, is all I have. What kind of cruel moment is this to plant such poison? I force a faint smile, dismissing him. "Not today, Harlan," I whisper back. But he doesn't smile. His jaw is set, his eyes steady as if he's watching a storm approach while everyone else admires the sunshine. The priest's voice drones on, speaking of eternity, forgiveness, and the mysteries of the soul. Yet my mind is fixed on that envelope with her handwriting, on the weight of my neighbor's words, and on the strange distance in my son's eyes as he stares at the coffin, eyes that do not seem wet with grief. For 3 years, he and I have barely spoken beyond necessity. My wife always insisted it was just the stress of his work, the exhaustion of building a family of his own. But now, seated between death and warning, I feel a hollow pit open inside me. I grip the gloves tighter. My heart flutters against my ribs, reminding me of the doctor's caution. Stress could be dangerous at my age, yet danger already sits beside me, whispering like a ghost. I look again at the letter. Its edges tremble in the faint draft that creeps through the chapel, a promise of secrets waiting to be uncovered. My neighbor's warning echoes louder than the priest's sermon, louder than the organ's hymn. For the first time, I wonder, what if my wife tried to speak to me, even after her last breath? What if the truth about my son is folded inside that envelope, waiting for my shaking hands to tear it open? I swallow hard. A single thought slices through my disbelief, cold and sharp as a blade. Maybe Harlan is right. And that was only the beginning. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. When I return home after the funeral, the silence inside the house greets me like an intruder. It's not the kind of silence that comforts. It's the kind that presses on your chest, making every breath feel too loud, too exposed. For the first time in 40 years, I step into this house knowing she will never call out from the kitchen, never leave her slippers by the back door, never hum to herself while stirring the evening soup. Her absence lingers in ordinary objects that now feel unusual. A half-finished scarf sits on the arm of her chair, the knitting needles crossed like a pair of accusing fingers. A coffee mug rimmed with faint lipstick rests on the counter as though she might pick it up at any moment. Even her scent, lavender and cedarwood, still floats in the hallway, haunting me like a tender ghost. I drop my coat onto the rack and sit in the living room, the gloves still clutched in my hand. The room feels colder than the air outside, though the heater hums faintly. My eyes roam the shelves, stopping on the framed photographs. My wife's face smiles from every corner, from wedding day portraits to blurry snapshots at family picnics. And beside her, always my son. His arm around her, his grin wide. A dutiful son, a loving child, or at least that's what I always believed. But now, Mr. Harlan's whisper needles its way back into my head. "Don't trust your son." I shake it off, muttering aloud, "Nonsense." The sound of my own voice startles me in the emptiness. Still, I can't ignore the way my son behaved at the funeral. His eyes dry, his words clipped. He stood like a man fulfilling an obligation, not mourning his mother. He left quickly afterward, saying he had work to attend to, work on the day of his mother's burial. The ache in my chest deepens. I take a slow breath, pressing my palm against my ribs as though I can steady the beat of my heart. The doctor's voice returns to me. Stress Mr. Warren will be your undoing if you let it, but how can I not let it when my whole life feels as if it's cracking beneath my feet? To distract myself, I begin tidying the room. It's what my wife would have done. She always believed in keeping order as a way to keep sorrow at bay. I gather the knitting fold, the scarf rinse the mug, but when I open the drawer of her writing desk, my hand freezes. Inside lies a stack of letters tied with a faded blue ribbon, letters addressed not to me, but to someone else. My eyes narrow. Each envelope bears her handwriting, that gentle slant I'd recognize anywhere. And on the top one, a name I have not spoken in decades, her maiden name. Why would she write letters under the name she left behind when she married me? I hesitate, my fingers trembling as they hover above the ribbon. The silence thickens, as though the whole house is holding its breath, waiting for me to untie it. But I can't, not yet. The memory of Harlan's voice rings too clearly. Don't trust your son. I close the drawer carefully, almost reverently, as though disturbing it too soon will summon something I'm not ready to face. The house creaks, an old board groaning somewhere upstairs. For a moment my pulse spikes, thinking perhaps my son has returned without telling me. But the hallway remains empty. The house is only echoing its loneliness back at me. I sit again, resting my hands on my knees. The scarf, the mug, the letters, all of them pieces of her whispering that something is unfinished, something unresolved. And somewhere between grief and suspicion, I realize that the silence in this house will not let me rest until I uncover what it is. But I soon realize that wasn't the worst of it. The morning after the funeral, I wake to an unfamiliar kind of silence. Not the sleepy calm of dawn, not the stillness of a resting house, but the heavy quiet of a place that no longer belongs to anyone but me. The air is dry, almost metallic, and for a moment I wonder if the walls themselves are holding their breath. I brew coffee the way my wife used to, 2 scoops never heaping. As the kettle whistles, I catch sight of the drawer I left untouched last night. The drawer with the letters. The blue ribbon seems to pulse in my mind like a heartbeat. This time I cannot resist. My hands tremble as I untie the ribbon and spread the envelopes across the desk. Each one is sealed, the wax brittle from age. Some are addressed to no one at all, only dates scrawled in the corner. But one set apart from the others bears my name. I freeze. The handwriting is hers, delicate, familiar, unmistakable. But there's something different in the way she wrote my name. Not affectionate, not rushed, careful, as if she knew I would find this only after she was gone. My chest tightens. I slide a finger under the flap and open it with a reverence usually reserved for sacred scripture. Inside, a single sheet. Her words. If you are reading this, then I'm gone. Forgive me, but I could not tell you in life. The truth about our son is not what you believe. Watch closely and trust your heart. I read the lines again and again, as if the letters might shift and form a new meaning. But they do not. They stand firm, accusing warning. My wife, gentle, loyal, honest to a fault, felt the need to hide this until after her death. I sit back, clutching the page so tightly the edges crumple. The kettle screams on the stove, but I barely notice until the smell of burnt metal fills the air. I rush to silence it, my movements clumsy. I lean against the counter, the letter still in my hand. My wife doubted our son. That thought alone is unbearable. She raised him with such tenderness, defended him when I grew impatient with his rebellions, forgave him when he missed holidays or ignored her calls. And yet she left me this. I glance toward the window where the curtains stir, though the glass is closed. A draft slips through the cracks, carrying with it the faintest trace of lavender. Her perfume, it lingers as though she has just passed through the room. My neighbor's words come back with brutal clarity. Don't trust your son. I laugh, but this time the sound is jagged, nervous, not amusement, fear. Because suddenly the 2 warnings align like pieces of a puzzle I don't want to finish. I fold the letter carefully and slip it into my jacket pocket. For now, I won't tell my son I found it. I need time to understand, time to watch. But silence has its own way of speaking. And in that silence, I hear my wife's voice as clearly as if she stood beside me. Trust your heart. I sit at the kitchen table with the folded letter in my pocket, and the memories start to pour in whether I invite them or not. It has been 3 years, maybe more, since my son and I last shared anything resembling closeness. Once he used to come home with stories of his college days, laughter spilling out over late dinners. He would lean against the counter, stealing bites from the pan, while his mother scolded him with mock severity. Those days feel like photographs left too long in the sun, faded, almost unreal. Now when he visits, his eyes dart around the house like he's measuring it. He asks questions that are less about my health and more about paperwork. Did you update the insurance, Dad? Do you still keep the deed in the study? How much is left in the joint account? They don't feel like a son's questions. They feel like an accountant's checklist. The first time I noticed the distance was on his mother's birthday. She had prepared a feast, even baked his favorite cake vanilla sponge with strawberries. He arrived late, took a single bite, and left early, claiming work. I'll never forget the look on her face as she wrapped the rest of the cake in foil. She tried to laugh it off, but her eyes lingered on the door long after it closed. Later, when she fell ill, his visits became even shorter. Sometimes he didn't come at all. Once during her hospital stay, she called him in the middle of the night, asking him to sit with her because she couldn't sleep. He didn't answer. She told me later with a tremor in her voice, "Maybe he's busy. Maybe he'll come tomorrow." But tomorrow never came. I rub my temples now, wondering how I could have ignored the signs. A father doesn't want to believe his son is drifting away. We excuse it. He's stressed, he's tired, he's building his life. But the truth is simpler and crueler. Distance grows when love stops tending to it. And ours had been left to rot in silence. On the mantel sits an old photograph, our family trip to the mountains. My son is perched on my shoulders, grinning with chipped teeth. His mother is beside us, her hand gripping my arm. We look unbreakable. I trace the frame with my finger, and the glass feels colder than the room itself. A thought occurs to me, one that sends a shiver down my spine. Perhaps my wife saw this distance long before I did. Perhaps that's why she wrote the letter. Not to warn me of a sudden betrayal, but of a slow erosion she sensed in him, something I refused to see. I close my eyes, but behind my lids I see his face at the funeral. Expressionless, dry-eyed, a stranger standing in my son's place. The floor creaks above me, though I know no one is there. The house speaks in small warnings. Or maybe it's only my heart beating too fast, reminding me I'm not safe in ignorance anymore. I take the letter from my pocket again, rereading the words by the dim light filtering through the curtains. The truth about our son is not what you believe. Watch closely and trust your heart. I whisper aloud. Why didn't you tell me sooner? My voice cracks in the empty room. I thought I was safe. But I was wrong. 2 days after the funeral, my son finally calls. His tone is brisk, almost businesslike, as if he's running through tasks on a checklist. "Dad," he says, "we need to sort through Mom's papers. The lawyer will need the files sooner rather than later. I'll come by this evening and handle it." Handle it. The phrase lands with a weight I can't quite ignore. It's the way one might speak of fixing a leaky roof or repairing a broken fence, not laying to rest the final affairs of a woman who carried him into this world. I agree, of course. What else could I say? But as soon as I hang up, the unease returns. I pace the living room, the letter from my wife still hidden in my pocket. Her warning gnaws at me. The truth about our son is not what you believe. Evening falls heavy, the kind of dusky blue that makes the house seem older than it is. My son arrives dressed in a dark suit, though his tie is loosened as if to suggest grief. He doesn't embrace me. He doesn't even ask if I've eaten. He heads straight for her study, his mother's sanctuary, as though he owns the place. I follow quietly, standing in the doorway while he rifles through drawers with an efficiency that chills me. He doesn't pause to look at her photographs, doesn't touch the books she treasured, doesn't even glance at the knitting basket in the corner. He pulls out files, stacks them in neat piles, flips through them with quick fingers. "Dad," he says without looking up, "let me manage this. It'll just confuse you. There's a lot of paperwork, insurance, investments, probate filings. I'll handle it. You just rest." The words sting, confuse me. I've run this household for decades, balanced accounts, paid mortgages, built our life with careful hands. But now in his eyes, I'm reduced to a stumbling old man who should keep quiet while his son handles it. "Your mother would want me involved," I say, my voice lower than I intended. That makes him stop. For a moment his shoulders stiffen, then he turns, forcing a smile that doesn't reach his eyes. "Of course, Dad. I'll explain everything. Later. Later, always later." He gathers the documents and slips them into his leather briefcase, snapping it shut before I can see which ones he's taken. I notice his hand linger on the drawer where the ribbon-tied letters once lay. The drawer I already disturbed. He tugs at the handle, finds it empty, then shoots me a glance so quick I almost miss it, sharp, suspicious. "You cleaned in here?" he asks casually, too casually. "Just tidied," I answer, keeping my voice even. My heart pounds, but I don't let my hand drift toward my pocket where her hidden letter waits like a loaded gun. He nods, but I catch the flicker in his expression. He knows something's missing. When he leaves an hour later, the briefcase heavy in his grip, I stand alone in the study. The room smells faintly of his cologne, harsh synthetic. Nothing like the lavender that still lingers from my wife. I lower myself into her chair and run my hand across the desk over the grain of the wood she polished every Sunday. My eyes fall to the empty drawer. A small scratch mars the surface near the lock as if someone had tried to pry it open before. And then, like a tide rushing in, the thought takes shape. It wasn't the first time my son went through her things, but I soon realized that wasn't the worst of it. The next morning I notice Harlan trimming the hedge between our yards. His shears click steadily, each cut punctuating the silence of the street. He glances up when he sees me, and for a moment his eyes soften, as if he already knows I haven't slept. I step outside, a letter still tucked deep in my pocket, and lean against the porch railing. Morning. I call my voice rougher than usual. He sets the shears aside and walks closer, wiping his hands on his work pants. Morning, Warren. How are you holding up? It's the sort of question neighbors ask out of habit, but his tone carries weight as though he already doubts the answer. I manage, I reply, though the words feel thin. After a pause I add, about what you said at the funeral. His gaze sharpens. You mean about your son? I hesitate, but curiosity outweighs pride. Why did you say it? Why warn me? He glances toward the street, then lowers his voice. Because I've seen things, Warren. Things you wouldn't believe if they hadn't happened right under your roof. My stomach tightens. What things? Harlan looks uneasy, tugging at his gloves. Late nights, lights on in your wife's study when you were at the hospital, your son coming and going at odd hours, sometimes with folders in his hand, sometimes with people I didn't recognize, young men in suits, briefcases. They didn't look like family friends. I blink. My mind scrambles to connect the images. You never thought to tell me sooner? He shakes his head slowly. Your wife begged me not to, said she'd handle it herself. She was afraid of something. I don't know what. But the last time I saw her, she looked at me with eyes I won't forget. She said, if anything happens to me, watch over him. He won't believe the truth on his own. The words strike me like a hammer. My wife's voice echoed through another man's lips. I gripped the porch railing, the metal cold under my palms. She trusted you more than me, I ask, bitterness seeping through before I can stop it. No, Harlan replies gently. She was protecting you. Whatever she suspected, she wanted you to hear it only when you were ready. A gust of wind rattles the branches above us, scattering a few dead leaves between our yards. I think of the scratches on the drawer, the missing documents, the smile that never reached my son's eyes. And you're certain, I whisper. Harlan doesn't flinch. I'd stake my life on it. Your son is not the man you think he is. Silence falls between us, heavy and suffocating. I hear the faint creak of my neighbor's gate swinging in the breeze like a hinge that hasn't been oiled in years. I want to dismiss him, to cling to the image of the boy riding on my shoulders in that mountain photograph. But the image shatters against Harlan's words, replaced by the sharp memory of my son's briefcase snapping shut. I clear my throat, forcing strength into my voice. If you see anything else, anything at all, you tell me. He nods. You have my word. As I walk back inside, the letter burns against my chest like a brand. My wife warned me. My neighbor confirmed it, and yet I still want to believe my son is innocent. But silence has its own way of speaking. And right now, the silence is screaming. That night, sleep refuses me. I wander the halls of the house like a ghost, each step echoing louder than it should. My wife's study calls to me, the air heavier there, the scent of her lavender sachets still clinging to the curtains. I turn on the desk lamp. Its yellow glow pools over the wooden surface, highlighting every groove and scratch. My eyes fall again on the drawer, the one my son tugged at so insistently before leaving, the same drawer that bore faint scratches near the lock, as if someone had pressed a tool against it. I kneel, running my fingers along the marks. They're fresh, not years old, not remnants of careless handling. No, these scars belong to a recent attempt. My pulse quickens. Why this drawer? What did he think was hidden here? The keyhole stares back at me like an unblinking eye. I try pulling the handle, but it resists, locked tightly. I search the desk. In the top drawer beneath a stack of stationery, I find a small brass key, the same one I discovered in my wife's jewelry box but never tried. My hands tremble as I slide it into the lock. It fits too perfectly, almost as though she intended for me to find it eventually. The click echoes through the quiet room. Inside the drawer holds not ledgers or receipts, but a leather-bound journal. My wife's journal. I lift it out with reverence, feeling the weight of it in my hands. She never let anyone touch her journals. They were her private sanctuary, the place where she untangled the knots of her heart. I sit at her desk, opening to the first page. Her familiar handwriting leaps from the paper, slanted, steady, full of life. My throat tightens as I read the first line. I fear our son has become a stranger to me. The words pierce through me sharper than any blade. She wrote this not to the world, not for publication, but for herself, which makes it all the more damning. Page after page, her doubts spill out. Mentions of money missing, of phone calls she couldn't explain, of conversations that stopped abruptly when she entered the room. She writes of a night she overheard him speaking to someone on the phone, saying, "He doesn't suspect a thing." The journal trembles in my grip as I read, my vision blurring. Each entry feels like a dagger. She knew long before I even considered it. I closed the book, pressing my palm against its cover, as if I could feel her pulse still lingering there. My son tried to pry this drawer open. He wanted this journal's silence destroyed before I could ever see it. The lamp flickers, and for a moment the room dims. I look toward the window. Across the yard, Harlan's light is on his shadow moving behind the curtains, watching, waiting. A floorboard creaks in the hallway and my heart leaps. I rise, clutching the journal to my chest, but when I step into the hall, it's empty. Only the house shifting under its own weight, or so I want to believe. I return to the study, locking the drawer again, but keeping the journal with me. Its weight is unbearable, and yet necessary, a burden I can't put down. I whisper into the silence, "What have you done, son?" But I soon realized that wasn't the worst of it. The next morning, the journal rests on the kitchen table, its worn leather catching the pale light of dawn. I sip bitter coffee, staring at it as if the book itself might speak. But it doesn't. Only the words inside echo in my head, "He doesn't suspect a thing." I know I can't ignore this anymore. If my wife doubted our son, if she tracked missing money, then I must confirm it for myself. By mid-morning, I make my way to the bank. The marble floors echo beneath my shoes, the air heavy with the scent of disinfectant and polished wood. I've come here for decades, always with my wife beside me, her smile making even paperwork feel less of a burden. Now, walking alone to the counter, I feel exposed like a child without his mother's hand. "Good morning, Mr. Warren," the teller says politely. She remembers me, of course. She lowers her voice. "I was sorry to hear about your wife." I nod, forcing a faint smile. "Thank you. I need to review some recent activity on my joint account, just to make sure everything's in order." She types briskly, then prints a sheet of transactions. My fingers tremble slightly as I accept it. I sit at a nearby desk, unfolding the paper like it's a letter from the past. At first, everything seems ordinary. Groceries, utility bills, hospital payments. But then two large deposits catch my eye. Not withdrawals. Deposits. Tens of thousands of dollars each, made within the past 6 months. The source listed only as private transfer. I frown. My wife and I lived modestly. She never mentioned any sudden windfalls, and she certainly would have told me if such money had arrived. I ask the teller, "Can you tell me where these came from?" She hesitates. "I'm afraid I can't disclose more than what's on the sheet. But it looks unusual," I agree, especially since both transfers came just after midnight. Midnight. The hour Harlan said he often saw my son slipping into the house, briefcase in hand. I fold the paper tightly, slipping it into my coat pocket. My pulse pounds with each step as I leave the bank. Outside, the autumn wind bites at my face sharper than it should be. Walking home, my thoughts spiral. Were these deposits meant for us, or were they meant for him? Was he funneling something through our account, using our names, our trust as a shield? Back at the house, I spread the paper beside the journal. The two seem to whisper to each other, her suspicions, my discoveries. A memory surfaces, one of those strange little facts my wife once loved to collect. She told me about a Sicilian superstition that money arriving at midnight was cursed, that it belonged to the dead, not the living. At the time, I laughed it off, but now, staring at these midnight transfers, the chill of that superstition sinks into me. I run a hand over my face. My heart feels heavy, strained. I try to steady my breath, reminding myself of the doctor's warnings. But how can I calm down when every piece of evidence points to betrayal? I hear the faintest creak at the back door. My body stiffens. I turn slowly, but there's no one there, just the door swaying slightly as though it had been nudged. I lock it firmly, checking the windows too. For the first time in decades, my own house feels unsafe. The journal, the letter, the bank records, they are forming a story I don't want to read. And yet deep down, I know my wife was right. I thought I was safe, but I was wrong. That evening, I decide to confront him. Not with anger, at least, not yet, but with questions. The kind of questions a father should be allowed to ask his son without fear. I invite him to dinner. The table is set the way his mother always liked: plain white plates, silver candlesticks polished until they glint, her linen napkins folded neatly. I even prepare his favorite meal, roast chicken with rosemary, hoping the familiar scent might soften whatever wall stands between us. When he arrives, his footsteps sound too confident, too sharp against the old floorboards. He removes his coat, lays his briefcase by the door, and offers me a smile that doesn't quite touch his eyes. "Smells good, Dad," he says, seating himself without waiting to be asked. I carve the chicken in silence, the knife scraping against the plate. The sound feels louder than it should. Finally, I ask, "Do you ever think about your mother's way of keeping everything in order? She always believed accounts should be transparent, nothing hidden." He stiffens just slightly. "Of course," he says. "She was meticulous." I nod, sliding a plate toward him. "Then maybe you can explain these." I place the folded bank statement on the table between us. His eyes drop to it. His fork hovers mid-air. For a moment he doesn't move. Then he sets the fork down carefully and unfolds the paper. He scans the transactions, his face unreadable. "Why are you looking at these, Dad? You should let me handle the finances." I hold his gaze. "That's what worries me. Large deposits, midnight transfers. Where is this money coming from?" His jaw tightens. He leans back in his chair, crossing his arms. "Do you think I'd do something wrong with Mom's account after everything she went through?" "That's exactly what I'm asking," I say, my voice firmer than I intended. The silence stretches. The clock ticks on the mantel, each second like a hammer. He exhales slowly, then forces a laugh. "You've been talking to Harlan, haven't you? That old man fills your head with nonsense. Midnight visits, shady deals. He probably imagines ghosts, too." His words are meant as dismissal, but the fact that he knows Harlan mentioned anything makes my chest tighten. How would he know unless he's been watching Harlan just as closely as Harlan has been watching him? I don't answer. Instead, I lower my eyes to my plate, pretending calm. Inside, my heart thunders. He leans forward, voice dropping. "Dad, you need to stop digging. Mom's gone. Let me take care of things." There it is again. Let me take care of things. Not for me, for him. I place my fork down, folding my hands. Your mother trusted me until her last breath. She left me words that made me question what I thought I knew. If you expect me to stop asking questions, you're mistaken. His face pales, then flushes red. For a second, I see the boy he once was, the boy who hated being caught in a lie. But the man across from me hides it quickly, replacing it with a calm mask. He pushes back his chair, leaving his plate untouched. "I don't have time for this. If you can't trust me, maybe I shouldn't be the one helping you at all." He grabs his coat and briefcase, his movements abrupt, sharp. The door slams behind him, rattling the frames on the wall. I sit alone at the table, staring at 2 plates of untouched food. The candles flicker in the draft from the closing door. And in their trembling light, I see the truth more clearly than ever. He is hiding something. But I soon realized that wasn't the worst of it. That night, the house feels more hollow than usual. Dinner plates still sit on the table, food untouched, candles burned down to stubs. I should clear them, but I don't. The silence feels too fragile, like any sudden movement might shatter it into something darker. I settle into the armchair in the living room, the journal resting on my lap. I flip through its pages, though my eyes blur with exhaustion. Each entry digs deeper into my wife's fears, her doubts, her unspoken grief. The words echo in my head until I can no longer separate her voice from my own thoughts. Sometime past midnight, just as I'm drifting into uneasy sleep, the phone rings. Its shrill cry splits the quiet, dragging me upright. My heart leaps, stumbling in its rhythm. No one calls at this hour, not anymore. I fumble for the receiver. "Hello?" At first, nothing but static. Then faint, almost too soft to be real, a melody. My wife's lullaby. The same tune she used to hum when our son was a boy, when he refused to sleep unless she rocked him gently in her arms. A tune so woven into the fabric of our home that even now, decades later, I can hear it clearly. But she is gone, buried. And still the lullaby plays, drifting through the static like a ghost slipping through walls. My hand tightens on the receiver. "Who is this?" My voice cracks, barely more than a whisper. The lullaby continues, slow and deliberate, every note etched into my chest like a scar. Then click. The line goes dead. I stare at the phone in my hand, breath shallow. My pulse hammers so loudly it drowns out the ticking clock. I check the caller ID. No number, just unknown. Shaking, I place the receiver back, but the house no longer feels like mine. Shadows press in closer, the walls themselves listening. I return to the journal, flipping through its pages with trembling fingers, and there, halfway through, I find an entry that freezes me. He still remembers the lullaby. Sometimes I hear him hum it in the dark, though I don't think he realizes. It chills me now, though, once it was sweet. The words blur. My wife heard him humming the lullaby, not out of love, not out of nostalgia, but in the dark alone, as if speaking to someone else. I clutched the journal to my chest, rocking slightly in the chair. The lullaby still echoes in my ears, haunting, unfinished. Silence settles again, heavier than before. I glance toward the window. Across the yard, Harlan's house is dark. No lights this time. No shadow watching. Just me and the echo of a song that should have died with my wife. I whisper into the emptiness. What are you trying to tell me? But silence has its own way of speaking. And I'm terrified of what it's saying now. By morning, I look and feel like a man who has aged a decade overnight. My hands shake as I pour coffee, the lullaby still haunting me. I tell myself it must have been a cruel prank, some crossed wire, some automated trick. But deep inside, I know better. That melody belonged to my wife and to my son's childhood, and now it has come back twisted like a warning I cannot ignore. I step outside to clear my head. The air is damp, heavy with the scent of rain-soaked earth. Across the fence, Harlan's yard is quiet. His tools lean against the shed, but the man himself is nowhere in sight. I almost feel relief. There are only so many suspicions a grieving man can carry before they turn to poison. I walk down the street to fetch the newspaper, though I barely read it anymore. The headlines blur. The stories of strangers matter less than the mysteries in my own home. As I return, I notice something strange, a folded slip of paper tucked beneath the handle of my front gate. My first thought is junk mail, but when I unfold it, my breath catches. Scrawled in hurried handwriting, not my wife's but Harlan's, are 6 words. He is not who you think he is. No greeting, no explanation, just the message sharp as a knife. I look up, scanning the street, but no one is there. Curtains twitch in a window across the road, but the glass hides whoever is watching. I retreat inside, bolting the door behind me. I set the note on the table beside my wife's letter and journal. 3 warnings now, each one circling the same truth, each one chipping away at the image I built of my son. But still, my heart resists. Not who you think he is. What else could that mean except betrayal? Yet my mind clings to memories. His first bike ride, the day he graduated, the tearful hug when he left for his first job. Could all those moments have been illusions? The silence presses on me, demanding an answer I cannot give. My chest tightens, and I sink into the chair, pressing my palm against my ribs. The doctor's warning echoes again. Too much stress, Mr. Warren. You must protect your heart. But what protection is there against betrayal by your own blood? The clock strikes noon. Its chime sounds distorted, mournful. I pick up the note again, reading it until the words blur into nothing. Outside, the hedge between my house and Harlan's rustles. I move to the window, but by the time I look, the movement has stopped. Only the faint sway of branches remains, as though someone was there watching, waiting. The note trembles in my hand. I whisper aloud, almost pleading, if he's not who I think he is, then who is he? But I soon realize that wasn't the worst of it. The slip of paper lies on the table beside the journal and my wife's letter, and together they feel like a jury staring down at me, waiting for a verdict, but my heart won't let me condemn him, not yet. To do that, I must go back. And so my mind drifts to the hospital. It was late winter, the kind where even the hallways smelled of cold metal and disinfectant. My wife had been fading for weeks, the cancer stealing more of her voice each day. On her last night, I sat beside her bed, holding her hand. Her fingers were frail bones pressing through thin skin, but when I squeezed, she still returned the pressure, gentle, deliberate, as though to say, I'm still here. She asked me in a whisper, did you call him? Of course I had. I called our son, begged him to come. He answered with that distant voice he'd perfected, the one that made excuses sound like obligations. Dad, I can't. Not tonight. I've got an important meeting. I'll visit in the morning. Morning never came for her. She passed just before dawn, her breath slipping away so quietly that for a moment I thought she was only resting. I sat there numb as the machines clicked and the monitors went flat. The nurse placed a hand on my shoulder, whispering, I'm sorry. When my son finally arrived hours later, he barely looked at her body. He asked instead about the paperwork, what forms had been signed, whether the doctor had written the time of death. No tears, no trembling voice, only business. I told myself then that it was his way of coping, that grief wore many faces, but now in the shadow of the letter, the journal, the neighbor's warnings, I see it differently. I remember the nurse kind-eyed a woman who had worked there for 30 years. She pulled me aside as I gathered my wife's belongings. Your son didn't want to stay, she said gently, but she asked for him again and again. She kept saying his name. I had no answer. I only nodded, swallowing the ache in my throat. Now that memory sears through me with new weight, my wife asked for him in her final hours and he refused her. What kind of son does that? What kind of man measures a mother's last moments against the value of a meeting? I clutch the armrest of my chair, knuckles white. The ache in my chest sharpens again, and I press against it, steadying my breath. The doctor's words echo louder than ever. Don't ignore the signs. Your heart won't forgive you. But how can a heart forgive what it cannot understand? I rise, pacing the room. The house groans in the silence, each board protesting under my feet. I glance toward the window, half expecting to see Harlan's shadow again, but his curtains remain drawn. I whisper into the empty air. Why, son? Why wouldn't you come to her? No answer, only the low hum of the refrigerator, the relentless tick of the clock. Silence has its own way of speaking, and tonight, its message is cruel. The morning after reliving that hospital memory, I decide I can't rely on shadows and suspicions alone. If there is truth to be found, it will be in paper and ink, the kind of evidence that doesn't vanish in silence. I call Mr. Redmond, our family lawyer, a man who has handled our affairs for over 2 decades. His voice over the phone is warm, though touched with hesitation. Of course, Mr. Warren. Come in this afternoon. We'll go over everything. The office smells of old books and polished wood, the air heavy with the scent of paper and dust. Redmond greets me with a firm handshake, his eyes soft with condolence. I'm sorry for your loss. Your wife was a fine woman. I nod, unable to form the proper reply. My chest feels tight, as though every word might betray more than I intend. We sit across from each other at his mahogany desk. He pulls a thick file from the cabinet labeled with our family name. He flips it open, shuffling through wills, trusts, insurance documents, all neatly organized as my wife would have demanded. But then he frowns. That's odd. I lean forward. What is it? He taps the file. There should be an addendum here. Your wife came to me 3 months ago with a revised statement regarding her estate. I remember clearly she insisted it be kept on record until her passing. But it's not here. My pulse spikes. Not here. What do you mean, misfiled? He shakes his head. Unlikely. My assistant and I both witnessed her sign it. I filed it myself in this cabinet. It should be here, but... He spreads the pages as if hoping the missing document might materialize. I grip the armrest of the chair. What was in it? He clears his throat. I can't disclose specifics unless I find the original, but I'll say this, it altered the distribution of certain assets. Not dramatically, but enough to matter. I don't need him to spell it out. My wife changed something in her will, something she wanted preserved, and now, conveniently, it has vanished. I remember the briefcase snapping shut in my son's hands. The look he gave me when he saw the drawer empty. The unease in Redmond's voice, now his brows furrowed as though he too suspects but cannot say it aloud. Could it have been stolen, I ask, though my voice already knows the answer. Redmond hesitates. Theoretically, yes, but only someone with direct access to this office or who persuaded me to hand over documents. Did your son ever mention speaking with me recently? I stiffen, not directly, but he insisted on handling all the paperwork. Redmond sighs, leaning back. I'll dig through backups. Perhaps it's misfiled, though I've never lost a client's addendum in all my years. I nod, but dread coils in my stomach. My wife's last attempt to speak through legal ink and signature has been erased, and I already know who benefits from its absence. As I leave the office, the weight of the missing file presses down harder than the gray sky overhead. Outside, the city buzzes with its usual indifference. Cars, honking footsteps, rushing strangers carrying their lives without knowing mine is unraveling. I pause at the corner, clutching the railing for balance. The thought slams into me. He took it. My son took her final words, her last protection, and buried them in silence. The wind whips against me, carrying with it the faint smell of smoke from a nearby food cart. For a moment, I remember another fact my wife once told me, an old superstition from Ireland. She said that if a will or written promise disappears after death, it means the dead are restless, unsettled, trying to push the truth back into light. Restless. Yes, that was the word. And now more than ever, I feel her presence unsettled around me. I whisper into the empty street. What did you write, my love? But silence has its own way of speaking. And today, its voice is louder than the traffic roaring past. Back home, I move through the rooms with a restless energy, like a man searching for air in a house that's running out of oxygen. The missing file gnaws at me, its absence louder than any presence could be. My wife tried to leave me something, and now it's gone. Stolen. I drift into our bedroom, the one place I've avoided since the funeral. Her scent lingers strongest here, lavender sachets tucked into the drawers. Faint traces of her perfume clinging to the fabric of her scarves. I open the jewelry box on her dresser, its hinges squealing softly like a reluctant confession. Inside are familiar things, Her pearl earrings, the brooch she wore to church every Easter, a necklace I gave her on our 20th anniversary. But tucked beneath the velvet lining, my fingers brush against something harder, colder. I peel the fabric back and find a small brass key. It's unmarked, simple, and yet it seems to hum with significance in my hand. A key always promises a lock, and a lock always promises a secret. I turn it over in the light. The metal is slightly worn, as if handled often, but never shown. Why hide a key here beneath jewelry meant to be displayed? I recall the scratches I found on the study drawer, the way the brass key fit perfectly. But this isn't that key. I still have the first one, which means this belongs to something else. I search the room for obvious locks, drawers, chests, cabinets. Nothing. I even check behind the dresser beneath the bed frame. Still nothing. The key lies heavy in my palm, useless yet taunting. My wife was not careless. If she hid this, it was meant for me. A strange memory flickers. Years ago, she told me about her grandmother's chest in Sicily, how it had a false bottom to hide documents during the war. Every family keeps secrets, she'd said, smiling faintly. The trick is knowing where they hide them. At the time, I laughed. Now the words claw their way back with new weight. I tuck the key into my pocket beside the letter. Together they feel like two halves of the same sentence unfinished. The house groans as the wind rattles the shutters. I glance toward the study, the thought forming before I can resist it. The painting. The large landscape above the fireplace. My wife loved that painting, insisted it hang there despite its odd size. Too large for the space, too heavy for a mere decoration. A painting that never quite fit. I step closer, the brass key burning against my thigh through the fabric of my pocket. My heart stumbles. Perhaps this key is not for a drawer, but for something much larger, something she left for me and me alone. The silence deepens, as if the house itself is holding its breath, waiting for me to discover what she hid behind that frame. I whisper into the stillness, "What did you want me to find?" But I soon realize that wasn't the worst of it. The brass key presses against my thigh as I stand before the fireplace. Above it hangs the painting my wife adored, a sweeping countryside, golden fields under a storm-darkened sky. For years I thought her attachment sentimental, but now I see it differently. She insisted it hang here in the heart of the house, though it never quite suited the wall. I drag a chair over and climb carefully, the wood creaking under my weight. My hands grip the frame. It resists at first, as though the house itself doesn't want me to disturb it, but with a grunt I lift it free from the wall. Dust billows into the air, catching in my throat. And there it is. A small iron safe, its black surface dull with age. The keyhole gleams faintly in the lamplight. My breath catches. For a moment I feel as though I've stepped into one of my wife's folk tales, treasures hidden behind hearths, secrets sealed away until the right hands find them. I climb down, coughing from the dust, and kneel before the safe. The brass key slides in smoothly, almost too smoothly, as if it has been waiting for this moment. I turn it slowly. The click is deep, final. Inside, bundled in neat stacks, are documents. My hands tremble as I pull them free. Bank records, investment statements, legal papers bearing her signature. And at the very back, a sealed envelope marked only with my name. I hesitate, the silence of the house pressing on me. The envelope feels heavy, though it can't weigh more than a few ounces. My wife's handwriting slants across it, the same steady loops I saw on the letter at her funeral. I tear it open with careful fingers. "My love," it begins. "If you are reading this, then the time has come. I could not speak it aloud, for the pain would have broken me. Our son has been deceiving us. He has moved money under our names, signed papers we never approved, and tried to turn the lawyer against us. I left proof here in case he took what I gave Redmond. You must protect yourself. Do not let him see this safe." The words blur as my eyes sting. She knew everything. And still she smiled at him during holidays. Still she set his place at the table. Still she defended him when I grew impatient. She bore her suspicion alone, carrying the weight until it drove her to hide these truths in steel and brass. I sift through the rest of the contents. One paper in particular stops me cold, a notarized deed. Not for this house, but for a parcel of land I never knew she owned. The signature is hers, clear and deliberate. She left it to me alone. I lean back, my knees aching against the hard floor. My heart hammers with the realization this is what my son was searching for. Not memories, not keepsakes, assets, proof of control. A sound shatters the silence, the faint creak of the back door. I freeze, clutching the papers to my chest. My ears strain. The house settles again. No footsteps. No voices, just the wind, or so I tell myself. Oh yeah. But I know better. I lock the safe again, slipping the key back into my pocket. The envelope and documents I hide under my shirt close against my skin. The painting I set back on the wall, careful to align it, as she always had. From the outside, nothing has changed. But inside me, everything has. I whisper to the empty room I know now, and I'll keep your secret safe. But silence has its own way of speaking, and tonight its voice feels like a warning. I spread the papers across the dining table, the same table where my wife once laid out Sunday roasts and fresh-baked bread. Now it is a battlefield of ink and signatures. Each document whispers pieces of a story I never wanted to hear, but together they scream a truth I can no longer deny. There in black and white lies evidence of transfers between accounts. My wife's name forged in places where I know her hand would never have signed. I trace the pen strokes slightly angled differently, lacking her subtle loops, the gentleness of her writing. These are stiff, hurried imitations. Beside them, bank records, transactions shifting money from our savings into an account I don't recognize, one linked not to my wife or me, but to a company name that means nothing, Linden Consulting, LLC. Yet on the registration forms, the address listed is unmistakable, my son's apartment. I feel the room tilt. My hands tremble as I pick up another document. It is an authorization letter supposedly from me giving him power of attorney over certain funds. But I never signed this. The signature is mine only in shape, not in truth. I lean back in the chair, my chest tightening. A wave of dizziness washes over me. I press a hand to my sternum, forcing myself to breathe through the pain. My doctor's warning returns. Stress will kill you, Mr. Warren, if you let it. But what am I supposed to do when my own son is the one tightening the noose? A sound escapes me, half laugh, half sob. I think of my wife, how she endured this knowledge alone, how she must have smiled at him while hiding the truth in her journal. And safe, how her heart must have cracked in silence. I shuffle through the stack until I find one more paper on that stops me cold. It's a letter from the hospital billing department showing that part of her treatments were covered not by our insurance, but by direct payments from that same mysterious account. At first glance, it looks generous, our son helping to pay for his mother's care. But no, the dates line up with the midnight deposits into our joint account. He wasn't giving. He was moving money in and out, laundering it under the guise of help. I slam the table with my fist. The candlesticks rattle, a glass topples. The silence that follows feels like the whole house recoiling at my rage. Across the room, her photograph sits on the mantel, her smile serene, timeless. I rise and walk to it, staring into her eyes. "You tried to warn me," I whisper. "I should have listened sooner." The air grows heavy, pressing against me. I swear, just for a heartbeat, the scent of lavender drifts through the room again. My throat tightens. She is here, or perhaps my guilt summons her. I return to the table, gathering the forged papers and tucking them into a folder. My neighbor's words ring louder than ever. He is not who you think he is. And now, with these documents in my hands, I cannot deny it. My son has betrayed me. He has betrayed us. Still, another part of me resists. I cling to the memory of the boy on my shoulders, the laughter in his eyes. How do I reconcile that child with this man who forges signatures and bleeds his parents dry? The house creaks, a floorboard groaning above me. I glance upward, heart leaping. For a moment I fear he has come back silently to catch me with his stolen secrets. But the sound fades, just the bones of the house shifting. Or maybe the weight of truth pressing down. I press the folder to my chest. My pulse drums in my ears. There is no doubt now. My wife's suspicions, Harlan's warnings, the missing file, all of it leads here to this undeniable truth: my son has been using us, manipulating us, erasing her final wishes for his own gain. I whisper into the silence, "What are you planning, son?" But silence has its own way of speaking, and in this silence I hear betrayal loud and clear. The next morning I cannot keep the weight of the papers to myself. The folder feels like a living thing under my arm, its contents too dangerous to remain hidden in my house alone. I need to look someone in the eye to hear them confirm that I'm not losing my mind. So I cross the yard and knock on Harlan's door. He answers slowly, as if he already knows why I've come. His eyes, pale and watchful, study me before he says a word. "Warren," he murmurs, opening the door wider. "Come in." His living room is as modest as mine, though tidier shelves lined with old records, the faint smell of tobacco lingering in the curtains. I place the folder on his coffee table, my hands trembling as I flip it open. "I found these," I say, my voice low, in a safe she hid behind the fireplace. Bank records, forged signatures. He's been draining us, Harlan, using our names, using her. He leans forward. Glasses perched on the tip of his nose as he scans the papers. His lips press into a thin line. I suspected, he says softly, but seeing it laid out like this, he exhales through his teeth. I grip the armrest of my chair, waiting for him to say more, to offer advice, to tell me what comes next. But instead, he closes the folder, carefully sliding it back toward me. Keep these safe, Warren. Don't confront him yet. Not until you have more. My chest tightens. More? Isn't this enough? Look at the signatures. Look at the accounts. Harlan shakes his head. It's evidence, yes, but he'll deny it. He'll call you confused, say your grief is clouding you. Without witnesses, without official backing, it's your word against his, and you know how that will look. I want to argue, but the truth of his words stings too deeply. My son is calm, articulate, practiced. He knows how to make me look like the frail, grieving old man. Still, frustration bursts out of me. You were the one who warned me, Harlan. You told me not to trust him, and now when I finally see what he's done, you tell me to wait. His gaze hardens, though his voice remains calm. Because timing matters. The truth has a way of showing itself if you let it ripen. If you rush it, you give him control. If you wait, he'll make a mistake big enough that no one can ignore. I fall silent, breathing heavily. His words settle over me like unwelcome ash. Wait, watch. The advice feels unbearable when the betrayal is already gnawing at my bones. Do you know more than you're saying? I ask quietly. He hesitates, then shakes his head. Time will show, Warren. Time will show. The phrase chills me more than if he'd confessed outright. His eyes, steady and unreadable, suggest knowledge he won't share, not yet. I gather the folder, clutching it to my chest. As I rise to leave, he places a hand on my shoulder. Protect yourself. Protect what's left of her. And remember, you're not alone in this, even when it feels like you are. The words should comfort me, but they don't. They sound more like a warning. Back in my own house, the silence feels thicker than ever. I tuck the folder beneath the floorboards in my bedroom, where only I will know. But even as I hide it, I hear Harlan's voice echoing, "Time will show." I whisper into the empty air. What are you waiting for, son? What are you hiding? But I soon realized that wasn't the worst of it. The following week passes in uneasy fragments, meals left half-eaten, nights without sleep, mornings filled with shadows heavier than light. Each time I pass the mantel, my wife's photograph seems to watch me with patient sorrow, as though waiting for me to take the step she could not. Then on Friday, the letter from the bank arrives. The envelope looks ordinary, but the sight of it sets my pulse racing. I tear it open, scanning the numbers, and my breath catches. Another withdrawal. Not a modest sum, not a mistake. Tens of thousands vanished overnight. The paper trembles in my hands. I never authorized this. No one could have accepted. I sink into the chair, gripping the letter so tightly it crumples in my fist. He's still doing it. Even now, with his mother in the ground with me watching, he's siphoning our lives away like water through a sieve. I stumble to the phone, dialing the bank. My voice cracks as I ask about the withdrawal. The clerk's tone is apologetic, too practiced, like someone who has delivered bad news many times before. I'm sorry, Mr. Warren, but the authorization came through with your signature on file. A power of attorney was submitted last month. My throat dries. Power of attorney. I never signed such a thing. But in the safe, I already found proof of forged documents. My son is not just stealing money, he's erasing my voice, replacing it with ink that isn't mine. I hang up without another word. The silence in the house swallows me whole. On the table, the journal lies open as though it has been waiting for me. I flip to the last entries. One line catches my eye, written in her steady hand. I fear he will not stop until nothing is left. Her words feel prophetic now, echoing through the empty house. Nothing left. I pace the living room, my chest tight, each step heavier than the last. I think of the Sicilian superstition she once told me, that cursed money disappears as quickly as it comes, leaving only ruin in its wake. I laughed at the story, then teasing her for believing in such things. But now, looking at the numbers draining from my account, the curse feels real. I check the locks on the doors, the windows. Paranoia has seeped into me like damp through old walls. Each creak of the house feels like footsteps. Each shadow across the curtains feels like him waiting to finish what he started. I press my palms against the table, steadying myself. Why, son, I whisper. Why bleed us dry when we gave you everything? The silence doesn't answer. Only the clock ticks steady and merciless. Across the yard, a light flicks on in Harlan's window. For a moment, his shadow lingers there, watching as if he already knows what the bank letter told me. I clutch the paper tighter, my nails digging into it. Another sum gone, another piece of us erased. And in that moment, I understand with a cold, final clarity he won't stop. Not unless I stop him first. But I soon realized that wasn't the worst of it. Sunday arrives, and with it my son's invitation. He insists I come to a family dinner at his house. "It'll be good for you, Dad," he says over the phone. "You need to be around people." Part of me wants to refuse to stay cloistered in the house where my wife still lingers in every shadow. But another part, the part hungry for answers, agrees. If he wants me there, then I want to see why. His home is modern, sleek, almost sterile. Glass and steel where warmth should be. Family members gather in the dining room, cousins, his wife's relatives, even a few friends I barely recognize. Laughter fills the air, but it feels brittle like glass waiting to shatter. When I arrive, he greets me with a firm handshake, not an embrace. "Dad, glad you made it." His eyes don't smile. Dinner is served, expensive dishes, wine flowing freely. I sit at the end of the table watching him command the room. He is charming, practiced the kind of man people trust easily. My stomach twists knowing the papers I have hidden at home tell a different story. Then, as glasses clink and conversation softens, he clears his throat. "Everyone," he says, raising his glass, "I want to thank you all for being here tonight. Family means everything." The words curdle in my ears. He sets the glass down, placing a hand on my shoulder with theatrical gentleness. But I also want to be honest about something. My father's health hasn't been the best lately. And, well, his judgment isn't what it used to be. The room falls quiet. All eyes turn toward me. Heat rushes to my face. He continues, his tone steady, rehearsed. "That's why I've taken on the responsibility of managing the finances, to make sure everything's safe, everything's handled. He shouldn't have to worry about complicated things at his age." A polite ripple of nods and murmurs passes through the guests. They believe him. They always believe him. My chest tightens. "That's not true," I say, my voice sharp. "I never gave you permission to take control." He chuckles softly, the way one humors a confused elder. "Dad, we've talked about this. You don't need to remember every detail. That's why I'm here to help." The humiliation burns hotter than the food untouched on my plate. I want to stand, to shout, to throw the forged documents onto the table and let the truth scorch the lies from his lips. But the folder is hidden beneath my floorboards. And here, surrounded by his allies, I would only look like the frail, forgetful man he's painting me to be. A cousin leans toward me with a pitying smile. "You're lucky to have a son so responsible." The words slice deeper than any insult. I grip the tablecloth to steady myself. My heart pounds a painful thud against my ribs. My son pats my shoulder again, his hand heavy, almost possessive. "Don't worry, Dad. I'll take care of everything." The room resumes its chatter, the humiliation buried beneath polite laughter. But I sit in silence, every nerve screaming. He didn't just steal money, he stole my voice, my dignity, my place at the head of my own family. I stare into my wine glass, the liquid trembling with the shake of my hands. My reflection stares back, older, smaller, diminished. But in that reflection, another thought stirs, a whisper from my wife's journal. "He won't stop until nothing is left." She was right. And if I let this continue, he'll erase me entirely. But I soon realized that wasn't the worst of it. The night after that humiliating dinner, I return home with fire burning in my chest. My son's words echo over and over. His judgment isn't what it used to be. He didn't just strip me of authority, he branded me incompetent before family and friends. My wife's absence makes the sting worse. She would have defended me, silenced him with a single glance. But now I'm alone, or almost alone. At dawn, there's a knock at my door. When I open it, Harlan stands there, his coat buttoned to the chin, his eyes somber. He doesn't greet me. Instead, he presses a small device into my hand, a digital recorder, its black casing scratched with age. "You need to hear this," he says quietly. I stare at it. "What is it?" His gaze doesn't waver. "Proof." I've been watching him, Warren. I wasn't sure whether to tell you. But after last night, you deserve the truth. My throat tightens. I gesture him inside and we sit at the kitchen table. My hands shake as I press the play button. At first only static, then voices. My son's voice. Clear, cold, calculating. And he doesn't suspect anything. "I'll have everything signed over soon. The lawyer's file is already taken care of. Once the deed is in my name, it won't matter what the old man thinks." My breath catches. The sound of my own son calling me the old man twists in my gut like a knife. Another voice answers, a man I don't recognize, smooth, confident, and the funds. My son again, already moving through Linden. By the time he realizes, it'll be too late. He can rant all he wants, no one will believe him. They'll just see an old fool. I grip the edge of the table so hard my knuckles whiten. The bile rises in my throat. Hearing the betrayal in ink was one thing. Hearing it in his voice spoken without hesitation is another. The recording clicks off. Silence falls heavy and suffocating. I look at Harlan. He studies me with a mixture of pity and grim resolve. "I told you, Warren. He is not the man you think he is. My chest aches, every heartbeat a hammer against my ribs. I want to scream to storm into my son's house and throw the recorder in his face. But the memory of the dinner stops me. His allies, his charm. He'd twisted claim the recording was doctored claim I was delusional. Harlan must read my thoughts. Keep this safe. Not yet Warren. Timing matters. But when the moment comes, this will break him. I stare down at the device, its weight disproportionate to its size. It contains the truth undeniable, immortalized in his own voice, a truth that could destroy him, but also a truth that could destroy me because once I use it, there is no going back. I slip the recorder into my pocket beside my wife's letter and the brass key. My heart pounds, as though it too wants to escape the burden of so many secrets pressing against it. I whisper almost to myself, "What have you become, son?" But silence has its own way of speaking. And tonight it answers with his voice replaying in my head word for word. I cannot sleep. The recorder feels like a live coal in my pocket, searing through the fabric, reminding me of every word he spoke. He can rant all he wants, no one will believe him. Those words echo louder than the tick of the clock, louder than the pounding of my heart. By dawn I know what I must do. I will not wait. I call my son and tell him to come over. My voice is steady, almost too calm. He agrees, his tone smooth, practiced. "Of course, Dad. I'll be there shortly." When he arrives, he doesn't bother with pleasantries. He strides into the living room like it belongs to him, shrugging off his coat and setting his briefcase on the coffee table. "What's so urgent?" he asks, his voice clipped. I stare at him, my own son, standing where his mother once laughed and read by the fire. My throat tightens, but I force the words out. "I know what you've done." His eyes flicker just for a second before he smiles. "What are you talking about?" I pull the recorder from my pocket and set it on the table. The sight of it wipes the smile from his face. I press play. His own voice fills the room. He doesn't suspect anything. "I'll have everything signed over soon. The lawyer's file is already taken care of. Once the deed is in my name, it won't matter what the old man thinks." His jaw clenches. The mask slips. Rage flashes across his features, raw and unfiltered. He lunges forward, snapping the recorder off before the rest can play. "Where did you get this?" he hisses. "From someone who sees you more clearly than I ever did," I reply, my voice steady, though my hands shake. He slams his fist on the table, the sound sharp as thunder. "You think anyone will believe this?" "It's nothing. You're desperate, confused, grieving. They'll see an old man clinging to paranoia." I rise to my feet, heart pounding, chest tight. "No, they'll see you. The forged papers, the missing file, the money funneled through shell accounts. It's over, son." For a moment we lock eyes, father and son, predator and prey, though I am no longer sure which of us is which. His breathing grows harsh. His face flushes with fury. "You ungrateful old fool," he spits. "Everything I've done was for this family. You couldn't manage it. Mom was too soft. Someone had to take control." The words cut deeper than any confession. He doesn't deny it. He justifies it. I take a step closer, my voice dropping. "Your mother saw through you. She wrote it down, every doubt, every fear. She left me proof, and she warned me. Even from the grave, she warned me." His eyes widen at that, a flicker of unease breaking through the rage. "She told you nothing," he snaps. "She didn't have the strength." I hold his gaze. "She had more strength in her silence than you'll ever have in your lies." The room vibrates with the weight of our standoff. My chest aches, sharp pains shooting down my arm. I grip the mantle to steady myself, but I do not back down. He takes a step closer, his face inches from mine, his voice low and venomous. "If you think you can ruin me with scraps of paper and a neighbor's whispers, you're a fool. This is my life now, and I won't let you take it away." The fury in his eyes is something I've never seen before, something inhuman, cold. For the first time, I realize I'm not just facing betrayal. I'm facing an enemy wearing my son's face. I whisper almost to myself, what happened to the boy I raised? But silence has its own way of speaking. And in his silence now, I hear nothing but hatred. His face hovers inches from mine, hot breath laced with anger. I can see the pulse hammering in his temple, the tension coiled in his jaw. For a moment, it is not my son standing before me, but a stranger, someone colder, sharper, dangerous. "You don't understand, Dad," he mutters, voice low but trembling. "Everything you built was crumbling. You and Mom would have wasted it all. I did what needed to be done." I steady myself against the mantel, my heart pounding like a war drum. Stealing is not saving. Betrayal is not duty. His fists clench. "You always saw me as weak. Mom babied me and you barely looked at me unless it was to criticize. Well, look who's in control now. I'm not weak anymore. I swallow the ache in my throat. Control doesn't make you strong, son. It makes you cruel. The silence after my words stretches long and heavy. Then, with sudden violence, he slams his fist onto the coffee table. The recorder skids to the floor. "Don't test me, old man," he snarls. The words hit harder than his fist. Old man, not father, not dad. Old man. I take a slow breath. If you keep down this path, there's only ruin ahead. The truth will come out. It always does. He paces the room like a caged animal tugging at his tie, his breaths harsh. Then his eyes flick toward the fireplace, toward the painting. For a split second, his expression betrays him. He knows. My blood runs cold. He knows about the safe. I take a step forward, stay away from it. His lips curl into a sneer. "You can't stop me. You don't have the strength." The words dig into my chest, and suddenly the pain there sharpens, stabbing like a knife. I press a hand against it, struggling for breath. He notices, but instead of rushing to help, he freezes, calculating, measuring whether my weakness serves him. And in that moment I understand. If my heart fails here and now, he will let it. "Get out," I rasp, summoning every ounce of strength. "Leave my house." He steps closer instead. "Not until you hand me those papers." My vision blurs. I stagger toward the phone on the wall. My hand fumbles, trembling, but I manage to lift the receiver. "I'm calling the police," I croak. Something flashes in his eyes. Panic, then fury. "You'd turn on your own son. You turned on me first." The silence cracks, and suddenly he lunges, snatching the receiver from my hand. The cord whips against the wall as he slams it down. His chest heaves, his voice a guttural growl. "You don't know what you're doing, Dad. Stop before you regret it." But before he can say more, the front door bursts open. Harlan stands there breathless, his eyes darting between us. He must have heard the shouting. "What's going on here?" he demands. For a split second, my son falters. Then he masks it with a practiced smile. "Nothing, Mr. Harlan. Just a misunderstanding." But the tension in the room betrays him. My trembling hands, the overturned chair, the slammed phone, it all paints the truth. "Get out," Harlan says firmly, his voice steady as stone. My son glares, his jaw working. Then he grabs his coat, snatches up the recorder from the floor, and storms out, slamming the door so hard the frames on the wall rattle. The silence he leaves behind is unbearable. My knees weaken and I collapse into the chair, clutching my chest. Harlan rushes to my side. "Easy, Warren. Easy." I struggle for air, words rasping from my throat. He won't stop. Not until he takes everything. Harlan's face hardens. Then we'll have to stop him first. But I soon realize that wasn't the worst of it. The days that follow blur together doctor's visits, hushed conversations with Harlan, restless nights, where every creak of the house sounds like footsteps. But underneath the exhaustion, something else grows resolve. I can't keep living in shadows, waiting for his next move. My wife hid the truth in journals and safes, but she also entrusted me with her final words. "Trust your heart." My heart says it's time to end this. So I gather everything: her journal, the forged papers, the deed, the bank statements, and the recording Harlan gave me. Each piece is a shard of glass, sharp and damning. Alone they might be dismissed. Together they form a weapon. It happens at the reading of my wife's will. The lawyer's office is crowded, cousins, distant relatives, my son sitting tall and confident at the head of the table. His suit is immaculate, his tie knotted perfectly as though dressing for victory. Mr. Redmond clears his throat, beginning the proceedings. My son glances at me occasionally, his expression smug, like a man waiting to collect a prize already promised. But when the lawyer reaches for the file, I interrupt. Before we begin, I say, my voice steady though my palms sweat, there are matters that must be addressed. All eyes turn to me. I rise slowly, unfolding the folder. The room stills as I lay out the papers, bank statements first, then the forged signatures, then the deed to land my wife never disclosed. Murmurs ripple through the relatives', confusion growing. My son shifts in his seat. "Dad, this isn't the place." Oh, it's exactly the place I cut in. My voice grows stronger, fueled by the memory of my wife's last night. This is where truth belongs. And the truth is, my son has been bleeding this family dry. I press the recorder on the table. The voices fill the room. His voice. His words. He doesn't suspect anything. I'll have everything signed over soon. The lawyer's file is already taken care of. Once the deed is in my name, it won't matter what the old man thinks. Gasps erupt. A cousin covers her mouth. Redmond leans forward, eyes narrowing. My son lunges for the recorder, but I snatch it away, holding it aloft. "No more lies." I say, my voice cutting through the chaos. "You betrayed your mother while she was dying. You forged her name. You stole her will. And you thought no one would ever know." His mask shatters. Rage floods his face. "You senile old fool. You think they'll believe you over me?" But the room has already turned. Relatives whisper, eyes darting between the documents in his trembling hands. Redmond slams the table. "Enough. These are serious allegations. I'll be taking immediate action." The air crackles with tension. My son glares at me, hatred burning in his eyes. "You'll regret this," he hisses. I meet his gaze unflinching. "The only thing I regret is not listening to your mother sooner." The silence that follows is deafening. For the first time, my son looks cornered. His charm stripped away, his power crumbling under the weight of truth. In that silence, I hear my wife's voice again, faint but steady. "Trust your heart." And for the first time since her passing, I feel I've honored her. But I soon realize that wasn't the worst of it. In the weeks that follow, the storm slowly breaks apart. Lawyers file their papers, banks investigate the forged signatures, and the authorities dig into the accounts tied to Linden Consulting. For once, the burden is no longer mine to carry alone. My son no longer visits. Word spreads through the family that he faces charges, that his reputation is unraveling faster than he can repair it. His silence now is not strength, it is defeat. I thought I would feel triumph, but instead I feel only a hollow ache. At night, I sit by the fireplace where her painting once hung. The wall feels lighter without its weight, though my heart does not. I take out her journal sometimes, running my fingers over the pages. Each entry is a conversation I never had the courage to start while she was alive. Each line a reminder of how fiercely she tried to protect me, even when it meant carrying suspicion alone. I reflect often on family, what it gives, what it takes, how it can wound deeper than any stranger. Betrayal doesn't come from enemies. It comes from those we raised with love, those we trusted most. That is what makes it cut so cruelly. And yet even in betrayal there are lessons. Harlan reminded me that neighbors can become guardians. The law reminded me that truth, though buried, will claw its way back to light. And my wife reminded me, even after her passing, that love leaves traces stronger than lies. I find myself humming her lullaby now, not with fear but with reverence. It no longer belongs to my son's shadow, it belongs to her memory, to us. Forgiveness is harder. Some wounds don't close, they scar. But I tell myself that perhaps someday, when my son has faced the weight of what he has done, forgiveness may be possible, not for him but for me, to release my heart from the constant ache of disappointment. The house is still quiet, but the silence has changed. It no longer suffocates, it listens. And in that silence I sometimes imagine her voice, steady, patient, proud, that I finally opened my eyes. I rise from the chair, stepping to the window. Across the yard, Harlan's light flickers in the evening dark. I raise a hand in quiet thanks. He nods once in return, no words needed. Silence has its own way of speaking after all. This story ends not with revenge, not with triumph, but with clarity. Betrayal has been unmasked, justice has begun, and I remain standing, scarred but not broken. "Thank you, my love," I whisper into the night air. "I heard you. At last I heard you. And for the first time in a long while, my heart feels steady." Thank you for staying with me through this story. If it touched you, please subscribe and continue with the next story in the playlist.